how's everything down in Sydney?
It's great. We're starting to get some cooler weather now, which is good. Just getting into. We've had some extremely hot weather. Where are you exactly?
I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, okay.
Winter is kind of fading away.
I've
I
been.
was actually supposed to come to Australia for a tour for one of my films, and my schedule didn't allow me to. But we're doing a whole bunch of screenings there. I think in Melbourne and Sydney and Canberra.
Yes, I've spent a winter in Toronto. I know what it's like.
Yeah, when was this?
When was it? Um, oof, well, 10 years ago, maybe. It was. I did a film called Repo Men with Jude
Right,
Law
right.
and Forrest Whitaker. That was shot in Toronto in the middle of winter.
Yes.
Out exteriors, crazy.
Yeah, we have the best of winter and the best of summer. It gets really hot in summer and really cold in winter. But Australia's weather is completely different, so you're at a good place.
Yeah, we don't have this in Sydney anyway. We don't have snow. Doesn't get that cold.
No, no, I was in Sydney just before COVID. I think it was December, November 2019. I was all over Australia. Loved Australia. I mean, it's very similar to Canada in terms of architect and all that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but just but just loved the weather and just the feel of it. It was just a tad bit different.
Well, I spent over 30 years in Los Angeles, and I'm glad I don't live there anymore. It
Well,
would be.
speaking of Los Angeles, Richard, I came across I have known of your work for a while, but I did not know the amount of amazing films and directors that you have worked with and worked on. You know, you have Shawshank Redemption, you have Green Mile, Se7en, The Rock, and big directors, Frank Darabont, Wolfgang Peterson with Air Force One, and even Chris Columbus with Harry Potter.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's such a different palette of work. And every director is just so different from one another, right? Especially Michael Bay and David Fincher are just completely in the complete
Don't get me
different
started.
realms.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess my first question is how do you work in with different directors as an editor and working at the pace of their film and their style and their approach? How do you switch
Well,
gears?
I I do pride myself on, as you just mentioned, with running through some of my films, that I don't like to get pigeonholed. A lot of editors get pigeonholed as like
Yeah.
action editors, or drama editors. I like to diversify, and but the way I approach it is still the same, really. I mean, nowadays we're always cutting, as they're shooting. So you're not assembling, you're cutting the scene so it works, and so that you have everything you need. And I came up through television where speed was essential, especially working on current affairs programs where you have to cut and get it done in an afternoon and it goes to air that night. There's no mucking about. You learn to be decisive. And I pride myself on trying to keep up to camera. I don't know if you know that term, which means literally you are
Yeah.
cutting as fast as they're shooting it. In other words, you cut in a day what they film in a day.
Right.
And a lot of times it has been very advantageous because a director may not realize that he has missed an angle. He hasn't got a close up or something. And I can say, hey, I didn't get this shot. I need it to make this scene work. It happened on the Green Mile, actually, which was not a very comfortable phone call to make to the producer and say, look, I'm actually missing a shot here, and they've left the location, and they had to go back to the location and pick up the shot. He really said, can't you make it work without it? And I said, it doesn't really work without this shot. It just doesn't work. So I pride myself in that, and cutting the scenes as they come in, and you can only cut them for what so they play in their isolation. It's not until you get the
Right.
scenes around it, and you sit down with the director at the end of shooting, when you start to adapt or accommodate the director's styles. Like a lot of them, some of them don't want to be in the cutting room when you're making all those changes and having to sit around and watch you do it. We'll go through a reel, take notes, and they say, "See you tomorrow. When do you think you'll have all those notes done?" And I say, "Well, after lunch." And they come in. I mean, Frank was very much like that, Frank Darabont. And
Yeah.
but some directors like Wolfgang Peterson used to like being there, telling stories or cracking jokes while I'm working, doing the changes. Some directors can't stand the minutiae of editing. It's a lot faster
Yeah.
now with Avid, but when it used to be film, it was literally like sticking stuff together with tape and splices, and it could be a very
Yeah. Yeah.
slow, laborious process. So
Yeah.
yeah, I try to remember that it's not my film. I'm here to facilitate the director and give him my ideas, but at the end of the day, it's his film, so you've got to
Right.
be sensitive to that and not be too proud or too don't take
100%.
over. Make the director. I always like to make the director feel comfortable in the cutting room, because some of
Yeah.
them have had horrific experiences where they've worked for someone who's pretty overbearing, and I don't think that doesn't make a good environment, doesn't make a good movie. So that's how I
Yeah.
work.
No, that's it's interesting you mentioned film versus Avid. I mean, I haven't I never worked on Moviola, but I did do flatbed editing on 16 millimeter. About 20 years ago when digital was just kicking in. And comparing that to digital now, obviously Avid, you being old school, which one, aside from the convenience, which one did you feel that you enjoy the most, or you enjoyed because, now it's all Avid more or less?
I enjoyed them both in their own times. Like I was brought up through television, and we use Steenbecks, instead of what's the American system, flatbed, Hem. We used the
Okay.
German machine called a Steenbeck, which was very common in New York, but not in LA. They used
Right.
Chems. But when I was in Australia, we all used Steenbecks, especially in television. And I would work with a 8-plate machine, which was 2 picture heads and 2 sound heads. So it was very much set up the same way that an Avid was, where you had a source machine, a source screen and sound, and what you're building on one other screen. So um, I worked that way, and not knowing. And it was one day I had an ex-assistant of mine who was then working for Avid. This was before I got into it. Came and said to me, "I think you would like Avid because it's very similar to the way you work."
Yeah.
And I didn't know whether to go with Avid or Lightworks. Those were the two systems at the time. And I was working on Se7en. Se7en was the last film I cut on film.
Yeah.
And David Fincher had worked in commercials with Avid, and he actually wanted to use an Avid on Se7en, but the budget wouldn't allow it. And I didn't know it. And I didn't know the system. And I said to him, "What should I do, Avid or Lightworks?" He said, "Go with Avid. That's going to be the industry standard." I mean, he was a smart guy, even at 32. he knew he was impressive.
Yeah, I mean, now Avid is used by pretty much everyone in the industry, right? And I mean, there are some films that use Premiere, but its percentage of that is extremely small compared to Avid,
Yeah, I
even
am.
TV.
Yeah, I think it's good that I think also what helps is that Avid and Pro Tools are owned by the same company now, so they're
Yeah,
pretty much they can
same.
take our files from the
Yeah,
Avid and put them into the Pro Tools, and it's all compatible.
yeah.
So that makes it
No,
life easier.
yeah, no, for sure, Richard. And Tell me your story on how you got into doing what you're doing, editing films and,
Well,
even
kind of by mistake,
TV.
actually. I wanted to be a cameraman, and in the
Okay,
AB, and in Australia in the late '60s, um, there really wasn't a film industry. There was television, or there was
sure.
newsreels, and
Mhm.
my uncle ran a film production, a film processing lab behind the ABC. That's the Australian Broadcasting Corporation,
Mhm.
and he facilitated the news department, processing the film for the news department. But he knew the head of the film department, and he got me an interview with him too. And I wanted to be in camera, and he said, "Look, there's no vacancies in camera, but there is one coming up in editing. Why don't you go in there, and then you can see, you can transfer over." So I didn't know much about editing, like most people don't know much about editing. And it wasn't until about 3 years into it, and it was a very good training area. But about 3 years in, I decided I didn't want to be in camera. I wanted to pursue editing. Mainly, I wanted to pursue drama editing because I went in working on news, which is the most basic form of editing, news for the nightly bulletins, and then current affairs, which became a little bit more complicated with double system sound and picture instead of just silent pictures. And
Mhm.
then I went to drama as an assistant editor, and that's when I really realized that's what I wanted to do. So it wasn't my first choice, but I never
It,
regretted it.
it's funny you mentioned that, right? Because I for the longest time I've always wanted to be a director, and when I had that eh, aspiration, I thought, director and cameraman are the same thing. This is like way back in 1993. And even though I do that, but I enjoy editing at times way more, which is something I never dreamt of. And I don't know, is it because that you get to, move around things more, is more control that you have in your hands as opposed to, working on a
Yeah,
camera, where you just, it's just something about creation, I think, if
it
that's the
is. It
right word.
is. It is very creative, and they say that the film is written 3 times: written by the
Yes.
script, written when it's directed, because when it's directed, it's
Yeah.
changing all the time, and then in the editing room. I don't think I've ever worked with a director that hasn't enjoyed the editing process. I mean, they normally are a little bit hyper and on edge and overstimulated by the time they get to the cutting room at the end of the shoot
Yeah.
because of the madness of all everyday set activity and the speed and the amount of questions that are thrown at them from every angle, from the actors,
Angle,
from
yeah.
everybody asking something. What do we want to do here? What do we want to do there? What should they wear this bit of clothing? Should they wear this? And I think when they get to the cutting room, it takes them a while to settle down and relax, unwind, and enjoy the process more.
Yeah. Enjoy, and also I wish I had gotten that shot.
Yes.
Did you ever get that?
Yes. What do you mean I don't have that angle? Yeah, yeah. Well, you didn't do it.
We didn't do the coverage for that.
Mm.
Richard, in doing The Rock, and Seven, or either or, what was the most challenging part in post in terms of creating editing a scene? And how did you overcome it? Whether it's the pacing, whether it's the mess, whether it's the story unraveling part or the character driven, whatever that was, what was it, if any, and how did you overcome it?
Um, on The Rock, I think the most challenging part of the editing process there is that they were still shooting while we were in final,
Oh,
supposedly post. They were always
okay.
changing stuff and going back and completing scenes or adding to scenes, and so it felt like we never really had that dedicated post production period. It always just felt like they were never going to stop filming, and so that was the biggest challenge, I think, with that. I mean, we would have Michael Bay would come into the cutting room, and we'd sit down and look at a scene that wasn't working, and we'd work out between us what shots were needed, and he'd go away and do them, and then we'd complete the scene. It felt like it was like that all the time. So at the end of it, actually, or getting close to the end, I just didn't think we had a film that was going to work. It just didn't fill me with confidence. But our first preview screening, it really went well. It was a strange, I don't think I've ever had that feeling before, because normally you go into these screenings thinking you've got a great film and you realize you haven't by the time the screening's over. So to think that we had not particularly good film that worked, to having a very good score, and then it did very well at the box office. So it took me quite a few years to realize that it was a good film.
No, it
I'm
was
very self-critical.
It was an amazing film, and it was regardless of whatever stuff happened in the background, right, which every film does, it was one of the films that sink in every way, from the cuts to the music to the action sequence and direction. I still remember, literally, like now just I'm talking to you, sitting in the movie theater and hearing, like, feeling the vibration of the music and the sound effects and the visuals moving so fast. And it worked, and it I have seen that movie, God, I don't even know how many times. And
Oh, really?
even just like few days ago I was watching it, and it just never got old. And then the score of The Rock is something I still have the soundtrack for the last 25 years, and I listen to it almost all the time.
Yeah, it was a great score. And I think a lot of it, I mean, the whole filmmaking process is collaborative, but what I've always found enjoyable and revealing, sometimes not badly, but is when the composer gets involved and the score comes to and brings the film to life. I mean, I remember on I think it was Shawshank, I couldn't go to all the scoring sessions because we were scoring as we were final mixing, so they were just trying to keep up with us on the mixing stage. And so you'd see a piece, you get a piece of music and on the stage, and that's the first time you'd heard it, and the mixers had heard it, and the sound crew had heard it, and all of a sudden it just brought scenes to life. I mean, they were well acted and well written already, but it just seems to up the emotional content impression about 50%. I mean, that's good music. Bad music, takes it the other way.
True. And for The Rock, was it your editing was completely done and the music came in, or was it like simultaneous back and forth while it was happening?
No, it was pretty much done.
Okay.
There's always some adjustments that you do.
Sure.
But normally, funny story. Normally when we're in post and the composer is already working on the film, and we've given him all the reels and they're locked. And if we ever do a change, we will give him an updated reel so that they can adjust before they go into score. The only person that doesn't do that is John Williams. John Williams, the first cut you give him, which may be 5 versions away from the final cut, he starts writing and scoring to that. And he says, no, I don't want another version. I said, but it's quite different. He said, don't worry, my music editor will fix all that. And he did. You just don't, the music editors are they're pure magicians. They're fantastic, amazing what they can do. And sometimes if they make a change, they may come to you and say, look, I just can't get this music edit to work. Do you think you can take a few frames off this shot and this shot? And I'll say, fine, yeah, sure, I can do that. That's no skin off my nose. We'll do that just to make the music work. But it's rare. But you've always got to be open to that. You've always got to be collaborative about it.
Well, that's why John Williams has been nominated for 53 times of Oscars, right? I mean, he's a
amazing,
legendary pro, and he's still at it. I mean, it's the amount of themes that he's created.
I mean, he wrote the main theme for Harry Potter. I think it was called Hedwig's theme. Hedwig, the owl.
Yeah.
He wrote a version of it and recorded it without seeing a frame of the picture. And they wanted us, and it just blew me away when we got it. And then the studio said they wanted like a demo reel of the film so far. So we cut a version of just shots, no dialogue, just shots from the first episode against this music. And it's usually the other way around, right?
Yeah.
That they make the music fit the picture. We made the picture fit the music, and the studio were just over the moon because it just looked so good.
Yeah.
He's amazing at picking a story. Well, imagining a story. I suppose maybe because he'd worked with Chris Columbus a lot in the past, but he knew what it was going to sound like. You know, he knew what it was going to look like, and the picture and the music just worked hand in glove.
Well,
I had the pleasure.
It's also.
Sorry,
No,
I've had the pleasure of working twice with John Williams. The first one was on Witches of Eastwick, and it was the same thing. He came into the cutting room to look at the image and look at the picture, and he's standing behind me and George Miller as we're running it reel by reel. And we turn around and he's like humming away, and he's writing the music as he's watching it. He knows the direction he's going to go. Incredible to watch.
Yeah. He's a genius. And I was watching Chris Columbus interview. I mean, they were talking about Home Alone. And, you know, when they finished Home Alone, there was no music. And, you know, they thought they had created a good film. But when John Williams' score came into play, it completely, I mean, this is Chris Columbus saying himself, it completely changed the film. And it has a great theme. It has amazing, you know, like tracks. Every single thing is that he just made that film. I mean, if you watch Home Alone without his music, I don't think, even though it's a great film, it won't work. You know, he's such a genius in what he does.
And that's what great music does. It's the emotional coda of the movie, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of people say it's manipulative but I don't see it that way.
No.
I mean, look at the themes he's written. Oh my God, you know, so many great themes.
Millions of them. Richard, in The Rock, when I think about The Rock, two scenes pop in my head immediately. And I have seen those scenes on YouTube by themselves over and over again over the past several years. The shower scene, when the forces come in and there's like an attack from the top, and then the green smoke, which is the ending where the fighter jet goes up and the blast takes place. Tell me how you cut those two scenes, because there's just so much intensity and emotion and suspense and drama in both of those scenes. Obviously, music has a part in it, but still the editing. Do you remember much about when you were editing those two particular scenes?
You know, I don't. I mean, I don't. You know, it may sound strange, but I just do it. I mean, I don't know if I have a way, a technique, or lost my earphone.
No worries.
Michael Bay is very much about putting as many cuts in as possible.
Yeah.
And I tend to be, I'm fine with that to a point. So I think a lot of it was, I said, Michael, you know, we can't have shots that are 4 frames long. You know, it's like too quick to register. And so a lot of the times it was detuning it from being hyperactive. So I always try to keep it moving as fast as possible, and we're remembering that the audience haven't seen these shots before.
Yeah.
So you can't go, well, make that shot half the length. And they go, no, you can't. People have got to register it and lock onto it, and it works fine on a small screen because your eyes don't have to do much work, right? But when you get it up onto a big screen, if they're quick cuts, your eyes are going from there to there, there to there. But I also like to try and keep, and there's only a limited amount of this you can do as the editor when it's already been shot, but like to keep as much as the action happening in the same part of the frame. from cut to cut, so the eyes don't have to
Yeah.
jump
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
So like if someone was walking across the screen and you knew that the next cut they were going to appear on that part of the frame, well then you wouldn't let them go exit the screen. You'd try and get them to get there, and then the next cut they're in that same position. You know what I'm saying? Especially
Right.
on a
Yeah.
huge 70-foot screen. So I always with action scenes, I'm always thinking of that. George Miller makes it easy because he shoots like that with telling the operators all the action's got to happen in the middle of the screen, even though it's an anamorphic frame, and that's why those cuts work so smoothly.
And my question was more of it should have been a comment as opposed to a question. It's just those two scenes are just so well cut. I mean, you can, there's very few films that have scenes in them that can stand alone by themselves as a short film. Let's just say that. Like Quentin Tarantino does that really, really well, the way he writes. Like his scenes are so long and they're just, you can take them as short films. But especially in The Rock, for me, those two scenes, you can watch them on their own and you will still feel something, the suspense, the emotion. You will understand the context. And that's what I loved about those two scenes. And I just wanted to, congratulate you on that. I know it's been a while, and I'm sure you've heard it a lot of
Yeah,
times.
I'll have to go and look at them again.
Yeah, and I know as an editor, sometimes the things that you think are very powerful, and you're like, yeah, I got it. People don't get it, and then the ones that you don't really care much about, people register with it a lot. So, but thank you for creating those.
Well, that's a film that is very much like that. Like, I have people coming up to me and saying it's one of their favorite films, and I go, really? Really? I just remember what it was like to get it to that point, and it was, arduous. So it took me a long time to actually believe those people,
Yeah. Were there any deleted scenes in Seven that you wanted to keep or David wanted to keep that didn't make it to the film, whether it was because of the running time or the movement of the story or pacing?
No, I really don't think there was any deleted scenes. It's been so long now. The only kind of controversy was about the end.
Or was there a scene that he wanted to keep or you wanted to keep and that it didn't end up happening, or were you guys very synchronized in that sense?
Oh no, we were very much on the same page. Excuse me, there's my cat.
No worries. No worries.
He never does that. He just knows he's on Zoom. No, there wasn't really any of that. We were very much on the same page, and it was just the only real controversy there was the end, which has been well documented, that the studio didn't think we could end the movie the way David wanted to end it, which was just after Mills had shot John Doe and just have him walking away,
Yeah.
But they had to go back and reshoot after our first screening, or not reshoot, but shoot a new tag to that scene. Yeah. But no, there was nothing. It was a very well written script. It was that and Shawshank and Harry Potter and The Rock really didn't have any rewrite. It was rare to have those scripts that when they went into production, there was no, rewriting going on at the same time as you're shooting, which happens a lot on films where, they're second guessing themselves. Those were just so well written that we just shot the scripts. Always a pleasure.
No, but here's one of the things I've asked a few editors before is that a director more or less gets a choice. Okay, if an agent brings a script to him, he or she may say they want to do it or they may not want to do it, right? When it comes to an editor, it's a little less, I feel, and maybe it's different for you, is that sometimes it's a job, you have to pay the bills and whatnot. Like when you get on a project, you go through the script and then decide, is this something different than what you have done before?
Yeah.
Is that
Yes.
the approach?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, in my early stages of my career, when I was trying to establish myself, you literally just took what you got, and
Yeah.
um, when I got the script for Shawshank, I got another script at the same time called My Father the Hero with Gerard Depardieu and Katherine
Mhm.
Heigl. And I was working on Sliver, the Sharon Stone movie,
Yep.
and it was exhausting work. It was long days, long hours. Um, and I said to my wife, I can't read these scripts. I can't just don't have time. Would you read them and tell me which one I should try and find time to do? And she read the Depardieu one and said, no, it's just not great, but not bad. And then the next time I came home, I said, have you started the other one? She said, yeah, I've started it. It's about men in prison. I don't know. It's early days. Then the next time I came home, I said, so did you finish it? She said, forget everything I said about it. You've got to read this script. You got to find time to read this script. And I was actually being chased by the other people who wanted me, and I hadn't heard back from the Shawshank people whether they wanted me. And there was this period of telling my agent, tell them you can't find me. I don't want to commit to that. I want to do the Shawshank one. And they eventually came
Yeah.
back to me. So yeah, I do.
Well,
But from about that point on, there was a period in the 90s, about a 10-year period, where everything I was asked to do was pretty good. And I was able to, and they wanted me and I wanted to do it. So I had a great run in that time, up until Harry Potter, I think. That was my highlight of my career.
well, I mean, yeah, 90s is the era that, you know, is something that I grew up in, and some of the most amazing films, the ones that we're talking about, The Rock, Shawshank, Green Mile, Seven, Harry Potter. I mean, these films not only, did well from a box office standpoint, but also critically. They were
Yes.
loved by people, and that's a rare thing. I mean, Shawshank didn't really do well when it came out in theaters, but eventually it did.
Yeah.
But they're still remembered by people and audiences. And in Seven, Richard, was it in the script not to show the last victim, the second last victim in the box? Was
Yes.
that always in the
That
script?
was always in the script. Yeah. And
Yeah, no, I'm glad that it was, because one thing I loved about Seven, and obviously script has a credit to it, but the way you cut the scene between Morgan Freeman's character, Somerset, and Tracy, Gwyneth Paltrow, you know, that relationship that was built between them
in the
in the
restaurant.
apartment and
Oh,
in the
there. Yeah, in the
diner.
restaurant.
Yeah. And it just paid off so well at the end, because it was not because it was in the script alone, but it was just the way it was directed and the way it was edited, everything. It really was. I mean, that to me was the film, the relationship between Morgan Freeman and Gwyneth Paltrow. It was just like two strangers who are trying to, get, just friends, and she's
Yeah.
putting faith in him. So
Well,
that was really well done.
well, the way I do love cutting drama and good drama, good dialogue, and I'm a great believer in, if someone is saying something important, make sure you've got it on camera. Don't don't. I mean, there was a great YouTube. I forget the name of the guy clip. Oh, you've probably seen this. This guy dissected a scene from Bohemian Rhapsody and actually broke it down shot by shot, and actually said this is the reason why Bohemian Rhapsody should not have won the Academy Award. And he was very. I've seen these kinds of things before, and I haven't usually agreed with it, but I agreed with him. The scene was an outside scene around a table, and it was so
Yeah.
overcut. It was a dialogue scene, so overcut and confusing too many cuts. And he eliminated cuts and then showed his version. It was so much better. But he was also commenting on things that, you know, I've always believed and been taught and always just know, just instinctively know that if an actor is saying a very important line, and cut away to someone else unless there's a reason, like motivation for cuts is very important. Otherwise you run the risk of having a scene look like it's been cut by a algorithm, you know. It's just all over the place. Like, why do you go to a wide shot in the middle of a scene? There's got to be a reason, you know. I don't think sometimes a scene is overcovered in the material, the angles, and you just can't really use all those angles. You think, why did they spend this time on a scene that could have just worked with 2 close-ups and a couple of overs and a master? I mean, that's a lot to do with, like, Clint Eastwood wouldn't do that. You know, he's famous for just 2 takes and that's it. Move on.
Yeah, no, and that's one thing that really gets to me too. And even in action films, I can't stand it. With the exception of Michael Bay films, because he just has this style. Is just, you know, there's just too many close-ups and too many different shots, different angles between the character. And you're right about one thing, that depending on what a character is saying, and if it's something really important, sometimes you want to show the reaction of the other person, but the audience is forgiving enough to not want to see that. They want to see the emotion that this character or whatever
that's right
wants to say.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, those scenes, those 2 scenes from '7 you talked about, if you look at them, they're very simple. They're very simple. It's great writing, great acting, and don't make a show of the editing, you know. Just, I mean, it's the invisible craft, isn't it? It's for a reason.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah, you know, you shouldn't ever really, unless for dramatic purpose, you should never really be aware of the cuts. You know, they should slide by.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a lot to do with, you know, where you cut. Like, don't cut in the middle of someone blinking, or, you know, that's a big thing that bugs me. It makes a cut pop. Someone blinks and you cut. It's just, don't do it. Avoid it.
And it's so true that, you know, I'm obviously an audience member, but at the same time I'm in the industry, and there's sometimes I would pick up on editing. Oh, that was a nice cut, or that was a nice cut, or that was a good place to cut. But sometimes I'm so involved, and that obviously has to do with the characters, with the script, with the direction, even with the editing, that the film gets over and I'm like, I didn't even analyze the film. You know, like the way the camera was set up. And that's the beauty of it. Like with '7, it was like that. The Shawshank Redemption, the Rock, I think it was when I first saw it, but because it was just an action-packed film, it had to be. And that's the beauty of editing, like not noticing that it was edited. It just feels like you were there and you were just watching things happen in front of your eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Usual Suspects came out before '7 with Kevin Spacey a couple of years before. And in '7, obviously, you know, you don't see, even in the trailers, they don't even, you know, the studio doesn't even advertise that Kevin Spacey is in the film, and they kept it under wraps. How important was it? Because there were a couple of scenes before, when he comes to the police station, when he's running away, and you see you know, obviously his action movement was really, really fast, but you see his full body. Was there a lot of blacks that well, I guess you didn't do color, but was that something in mind of David Fincher that, you know, that we have to make sure that he's...
Yeah, and I think the main reason that and it makes perfect sense, that it didn't want to put Kevin Spacey's name in the credits, is because John Doe is this mysterious character for so much of the movie, until he turns around at the police station and says, "Here I am," basically. then everybody would have known who it was because they would have seen his name at the front, and he's not, he's still on it, not in it. 30 minutes in, he's still not in it, and so they go, oh, he's the killer. So I think that was the main reason they didn't want to. But then again, once the movie's out, everybody knows that.
But
it's not like
audience is pretty good in that, because I remember when it came out, a lot of people would say, I don't want to tell you what it is, you just got to go watch it. Like they wouldn't even tell you that Kevin Spacey was in it,
Yeah, that was way before the internet now, right? When you can't keep a secret anymore. They couldn't do that today, could they?
No, you can't. Working on Shawshank, Richard, what was the most gratifying, not as an editor, as a human being, what was something that you enjoyed the most in terms of the story and the scene that you were composing or watching after you were putting them together?
I think just that it was such a compelling story. The dialogue was great. I mean, when I read it, I just knew I had to do that film. This is a real movie about real. I mean, it wasn't flashy. I mean, the quickest cuts in that movie is when the character of Gil Bellows' character, I forget his name now, when he was shot. I think those are the quickest cuts in the movie.
Yeah.
But it's just a good solid drama, and the setting. I mean, it wasn't a very pleasant location to be honest. Middle of Mansfield, Ohio. And in the summer, it was pretty tough, but it was worth it. It was worth the 3 months or 4 months, whatever it was. I don't know. It's just.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's just something speaks to you. You go, I want to do this.
I know.
I didn't think it was going to be a big hit. I didn't really. I just thought it was going to be a good movie. It didn't seem to be commercial, but I think that certainly, we knew we had something unusual when we first previewed it, and we previewed it in a part of LA which is a large black area, mixed race area, and a lot of people in the audience were actually talking and yelling to the screen, like, they were so involved in the movie. That was an eye-opener. That was just an eye-opener. They were hooting and hollering when it all came to an end. And I mean, it was just like a party. It was just bizarre. And then it was very disappointing then when it didn't do well at the box office. And that's a whole nother story. I think they just didn't know what they had. They didn't know how to market it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and when you were working on Shawshank, and I know you kind of mentioned this in the beginning, that most of the times you were editing simultaneously. Were you physically at the location?
Yes.
When you were?
Yeah, we were in this old factory. I think it was the GE factory that was closed down, this big spooky old place. And it was next to it, outside, they in a warehouse outside, they built the cell block. Because that cell block, the main cell block, where all the rows of cells, that was a set, but everything else, all the other parts of the prison were actual, because the cell blocks in the prison were not, they weren't very suitable for filming. They weren't very photogenic.
Sure. But when you're on the set editing, simultaneously, is there ever a time that you actually go when the scene is being shot just as a coffee break, or intentionally that I just want to see how this is playing?
Yeah, I avoid going to the set in a lot of ways. Because everything moves so slowly there, and I also don't want to be in any way influenced by what's going on in politics on the set. I really just want to be influenced by what's in front of me the next day, which is the dailies. And it's like instant gratification too, because it's the whole day's filming is all there for me straight away. Whereas
Right.
the painful part of 12 hours of getting it all together and the pace of the set, the amount of time between takes. I don't think I ever could have really been a director, because I'm very much like, right now, give me that shot. I want to use it, cut it in. I can do it straight away instead of waiting. But so I didn't go down there very often, only when I was asked to go down there, because the director or the producer had a question for me about was this going to work, going from this scene to that scene, because they already had one of the scenes in the can, and they wanted to know how they were transitioning, and was it going to work if they did this, and this. So that was their only time.
Yeah. In Seven, I was actually watching it today, just to kind of refresh my memory, just because it's been a long time. And one thing that I really loved, I don't remember the names of the characters that well. The scene where there's a photograph with the blood around the woman's eyes. I don't know if you remember that. And when they're talking about it, and the scene cuts, and you see Gwyneth Paltrow lying down on the bed, and to me, I maybe I'm overlooking it. Was that something intentional, like a foreshadowing, or just kind of giving little signals to the audience that there's a woman?
No. I think you're reading a bit too much into that. No, there was nothing there. No.
Okay, I read
Well, as
way
far
too
as
much.
I know, David might have had a different idea, but he never told me.
It's probably not. Then I'm just probably looking into it too much. This is what happens when you watch sometime too many times. You start looking into it too much.
True.
And what are you working on nowadays?
I'm retired now.
Are you
I haven't
done?
worked. Yeah, I'm done. It's become too. I mean, look, I haven't worked on a film for 4 years, 5 years maybe. I'm in the grandfather business at the moment and enjoying that.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's I don't know. It's such a different world now. I don't know if I'd enjoy it too much. I mean, the best films now seem to be made for streaming services, and all the other films are like, I don't want to really work on another version of Batman or Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all movies. I was brought up in the era of David Lean and Dr. Zhivago and all those.
Amazing
That was
movie.
what I considered a movie, and that's what got me interested in the business. And I was at least lucky enough to work on films that were movies. So
I'm right there with you. I am not a fan of superhero movies. I don't watch them, and I miss those movies. Like, I mean, Christopher Nolan now is one of those directors. Quentin Tarantino, just last few left. Actually, speaking of that, if Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino or Steven Spielberg came to you and said they want you to edit one of their films, would you reconsider?
I would. I would,
Yeah.
I worked with too many directors towards the later part of my career that were old enough to be my son, and I don't think they necessarily want to work with someone who can would be their father. I mean, all the young filmmakers coming up, and I mean, it was the same when I was coming up. We were all young, working together. You didn't really have old people working on the movie. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
don't
mean
know.
it's the same thing. It's the same thing like if you're in your 40s and if there's a director who's 22, 23, chances of them hiring somebody who's in their 40s is highly unlikely just because,
No,
it's different
they want to hire their
different
friends.
mindset. Yeah.
Their peers. They don't want to hire some old fogey.
Yeah. What's some of your favorite films that you obviously, that you haven't been part of? I mean, you mentioned Dr. Zhivago, and I'm sure Lawrence Arabia is up there too. Some of the films that you have enjoyed over the last 4 or 5 decades.
Well, I really liked Chicago. Chicago was a fantastically energetic film, but it wasn't it could have so easily been exhausting to watch, but I found it thrilling, editorially especially.
Right.
Beautifully cut. But also it was a fun movie, and there was such power behind the performances, the songs. I don't know, it's a hard one. Obviously I mentioned before the David Lean films were the ones that, and Robert Wise, and I don't really have any really. It's not a great sound grab, is it? I don't have any.
No. I'm not looking. I honestly am not looking for sound grabs. It's just more so just a conversation. Or maybe now. What was the last good film that you saw? And this is not to put down any other film, but that's something that spoke to you or clicked with you in whatever capacity that was.
Yeah. What was the last good film? Well, I love Steven Spielberg's last film, The Fabelmans. I really thought that was
great.
I mean, it was such an insider film, but it was also, I think, entertaining enough for people as a story, just on its standalone story. But I found that of the last year anyway, that was my favorite film. I liked 1917. I thought that was a great piece of filmmaking. I mean, it was gimmicky in a way, but it didn't really strike me as gimmicky. The supposed one shot movie. It was just so well done. I thought the story was good. That was probably the last movie that I've really liked.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very rare now. Good, at least from my point of view, good films are being made, or maybe we're all getting old, right? Like our tastes are sort of fading away, and maybe that's what
we always say. It was good in the old days, but I think the 80s and the 90s particularly, if you look at the films that were up for Academy Awards, and when there was only 5 for Best Picture, there were in 1 year you go, oh my God, they're all good films. But now it's I think it's diluted by the fact that they have 10. You've got to vote for 10 in the Best Picture category, because
it's not even the number. I find again, I don't know if the argument is that I was young at the time in the 90s that I would know this, or was it because really good film? Like I would literally know every single film that was nominated, then the actor, then the actresses, and because they were good films, like they were actually genuinely picked really, really well. But now, I mean, in the last 10, 15 years, especially in the last 10 years, Academy Awards will come in and I'll be like, okay, let's watch this movie, and I'll watch them like, why was this even nominated? It doesn't have any.
I totally agree, and I go on about it sometimes too much, because it's sad, because these aren't. Can you remember the last few years? Like last 5 films that won Best Picture?
Clue. No clue.
I mean, they're not memorable anymore. They're not. They may be okay in the moment for that year, but after, they don't stand the test of time. Is what I'm saying. Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, and it's also true in terms of we remember certain lines from a lot of movies back from the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. Like from Jaws, from Schindler's List, from Home Alone, from The Rock, all these. But now I have there's just nothing out there. Everything is out on memes, like on the internet. People make these memes up. But I don't know any lines from any films that come out now. They're not memorable enough. They're not written well.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Oh, good. This has been great, Richard. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you want to add?
No. I'm happy I can help you.